not to accuse people and just to say, listen, and those that I'm referring to who are saying let's not talk about white supremacy and all this stuff. I don't think well, cancel them. I hate canceling. I'm not a cancel culture person. Then let's have conversations about why we need to do this. And when talking to people of privilege, white privilege, I mean, I'm in that position where I get to talk to audiences, and I center discussions of privilege in whatever I'm talking about, because I have that platform, right? And I use it because I think the only acceptable purpose of privilege is to dismantle privilege. That's our responsibility goes with it. So how do I do it? I use my platform. And I've had people say, like, well, why'd you have to bring up? I'm like, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I come from a place, I don't know everything. I speak confidently, but there's a lot I don't know.
Same here.
And I question myself constantly, but ultimately we're on the right path. I think scholars being able to connect the struggle for Palestinian liberation with the struggle against white supremacy is very helpful. And then connect it to access to resources.
Yeah.
And so there you've got your whole, I mean, look at Palestine. Their access to earning a living is restricted. Their access to food, water, even before the siege, this big one, their access to food and water was restricted.
Yeah.
Those are class issues, but there are also supremacy issues there. And that always works, like you said, inextricably linked.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's something that I would like to see the left more coalesce around, just being kinder to people and recognizing the intricacies and the links between class and identity. For those of us who are on the left, and, full disclosure, I'm a communist, so that's, how far left I am on. But how do those of us who are on the left, and you spoke about being kinder to people who are moving into this, how do we take advantage of these upswelling, the uptick in people who are recognizing colonization, who are recognizing what the empire is doing, and how do we use that to our advantage to tell people, look, we can have good things without oppressing other people? How do we do that, in your view?
Well, I mean, I think you just did it. Having conversations, don't underestimate the importance of having, and I can be very acerbic. Although it's funny, when I do these things, I am generally in my life, I'm not. I'm kind of a goofy person. I am.
Me too.
Like, I walk around my house singing and I make words up and I'm like, I'm just goofy. And that's kind of the essence of me. But when I'm fired up, this is me, right? Your kindness comes across instantly, and your compassion comes across instantly. It's very, very palpable. And, I think having conversations with people and just saying what you said, does our freedom have to be at the expense of someone else's? That troubles me.
That's a good question.
And that's one thing. Using opportunities, never underestimate those that are connected with faith communities, whether it's a mosque or a temple or a church or any kind of group. If you're pagan, then your group of witchy pagans, like I have friends that are, like, you sit and you have conversations. This is how it started. You think about how the civil rights, talk about the connection between what's going on now. Jewish people were integral in the civil rights movement in this country. And that's like the same mentality as the Jewish Voices for Peace. They were called traitors by their own, by other white people for doing it. But how did these conversations happen? They happened in churches and temples and other places. over coffee and cake, where we sit with each other and we say, this is not, have compassion. And also, I don't like, I get particularly upset when, if somebody was on the one side and now they're coming to us, like, let's be cautiously welcoming.
Gotcha.
And it's just important to me, because the only way we win is by drawing the circle bigger. There are going to be people who we did not consider allies in the past who are allies now. And yes, they need to prove themselves. I am fully there with that. But we must give them the opportunity without tearing them down. And I think it's important that we let them in, because I don't practice my Catholicism, but I grew up with a Christian upbringing. And I like a lot of some of the parables that were in part of my faith growing up. And one of them was that prodigal son, which was that, like, he was a philanderer and wasted all his inheritance. And then he came back broke and all, like, drunk and hungover. And the father welcomed him and gave him this huge feast. And the good son, who never did that, said, why are you, this guy was an asshole. He spent his whole inheritance. Why'd you do it? And the dad was like, listen, he came back, right? We have to do this. We've got to draw our circle bigger and give people the space. We can't be like they are. I'm not saying anybody is right now, but online regularly, I'm being bullied by Democrats telling me, if I don't vote for Biden, and I tell people not to vote for Biden, then I'm a pro-Hamas MAGA terrorist. You're a bully. Democrats are the biggest bullies in our political system. They bully far more than MAGA does. We can't be like them. Everyone has to have their own awakening, but it's happening. It really is. I'm telling you, it is happening.
By what you just said, this reminds me of something that the late Michael Brooks said. And I just want to share this because I think it is so apropos to what you were talking about. Gosh, I wish this thing was bigger, but hopefully you guys can see. But there's Michael Brooks right in the middle, and he's speaking. Let's just hear this.
And it's an immense honor to be here, including definitely with Dr. West, who is an influence on me. And one of the major reasons that he's an influence on me is because of that synthesis and the ability to hold multiple truths. That we have to have some sense of a capacity here to do something with democracy, and then also not lie and deceive ourselves about what we are and what capitalism is and what empire is. I came across a speech fragment from Martin Luther King Jr. recently, which I played on my show, and I don't know where or the title of the speech, but I thought it was so important because we've put a lot of work, and we still have to put work into reminding everybody that the man was on the left. He wasn't a guy who came out once a year and said everybody should treat each other nice. He was a serious. But the other thing that I loved about this speech, which was he talked about the fallacy that certain Christians misunderstood love as a ceding of power. And then Nietzsche came along and rejected Christian morality because he thought it was denying someone's vitality, the will to power in a healthy sense. And he said, love without power is sentimental and anemic, and power without love is abusive and corrosive. I'm paraphrasing. And that was when I saw it, I thought, well, we know the left wing Dr. King. Well, here's the Machiavellian Dr. King, and I love it. I want the left to have Machiavelli so that we can have the strategy, the ruthlessness, the clarity to actually win these battles and be ruthless with institutions. And then I want us to learn how to be really kind to each other, welcoming of a broad set, and actually have a movement that has the capacity to do that. That's why the cancel stuff is relevant that Katie brought up, because it's a stand-in for this eliminationism of other humans, which is neoliberalism enacted. And it's also a contradiction from when we get utopian. It's beautiful. We're the people who sit around and we say, why don't we have a world where there's no prisons? Okay. That's a radical fucking statement. That's a real thing, and we should take it seriously. But then, on the other hand, oh, well, these people could never be part of our coalition because they made a mistake or said something. Like,
wow,
Yeah.
I never heard that. It's weird that you have that queued up because that's just what we're talking about. Listen, people were giving Cornel West a hard time because he voted for Biden and told people to vote for Biden last time around. My thing is, okay, where are you now?
That's a good question.
You know, and if somebody says, well, I don't want to vote for him because he did that, that's your right. But to go online or go on your podcast and be like, he's a phony, well, fuck you. Because what's it like up there on Perfect Mountain? You know, can you see for miles? You're great. You're there. No, we all had our journey. Very few of us were born radical communists. Maybe some. Tupac was, and they killed him.
Yeah, they killed him.
What's up with Diddy? Don't even.
Oh, I gotta look into it.
I never liked him. And there you go. That's all I want to say. And I think he had something to do with, Big Papa. But anyway, that's beside the point. I do want to say,
I'm gonna look into that, and I might have to talk about.
I don't know. Listen,
Yeah.
no, but Tupac was born a communist, right? It was his parents were radical, and the Shakurs. But listen, we all took our time.
By the way, Assad Shakur's autobiography. I read it on my channel. So.
Oh really? Oh, okay. I should. We all had our journey, and we're on it, and we're coming to it. So let's people in. I don't want to let people in who don't center human justice, but I question when I hear people who are prominent in the movement say we can't talk about white supremacy. Why not? Well, you're going to lose. What, really? And you know who I'm talking about? Giving Cornel West a hard time because he said white supremacy was a losing issue. Yeah. But it's real and it is connected. And if you don't think what's happening in Israel is white supremacy, my God, Zionism is white supremacy. Embodied in a political movement, Judaism isn't. Judaism is the opposite because it centers oppression, the oppression of the Jewish people through the ages over generations and generations. Back from Egypt, that was their whole message.
Yep.
That centers oppression and liberation. Zionism is the opposite.
Yep.
But don't tell me we can't talk about white supremacy in our movement, and that I'm against leftism if I'm going to lose those MAGA people who might. And by the way, welcome them in. If there's a person who voted for Trump twice, but they believe in universal health care and they want to work for it, you're welcome. And hopefully you will see by a broad, diverse coalition of people that are working for justice that maybe the way you saw the world before wasn't reality.
Yeah, we can do that. Of course.
We can do it. And what else? Was it Michael Brooks that said, be ruthless with systems and be gentle?
Be kind to other people. Yeah.
Be kind to other people. And it's just, I got to remind myself of that sometimes too. I get all worked out.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. I may look perfect, but I'm just kidding.
You are, I have to say, the difference between you and that photo, your little logo, which is a really cool logo. I like your hair, man. It's looking awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
It's hot. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Thank you. And I one of the things that, and you may have some, I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm saying to people in general, you may have a disagreement or two with a few people who are on the left. But ultimately, it's about coming together to realize that the system does not work for most of us. And you have to realize that a lot of people, especially, some of us are pawns in a system to keep us divided.
Yep.
And by realizing and waking up that you are a pawn to the system, also means realizing that some of us who may be in privileged positions are being used to keep that system in place. And so it is not wrong to point out, yes, you're a pawn and this is how, so that you can take that knowledge and then say, oh my gosh, I'm being a pawn used, and then insert marginalized groups against those marginalized groups.
Yeah.
Because the marginalization that happens is both identity and class related.
Yes,
And
it
a
is.
lot of people don't want to acknowledge it because they think that you have to separate them, when in reality they cross-pollinate.
Thank you.
So it's just like, for instance, be a grown-ass man, go into a company, suddenly put it on a dress, and see whether or not it'll affect your bottom line as far as whether you'll still get hours, whether you'll still get hired, or whatnot.
Or whether you'll get
Guess
served.
what? It still happens.
Whether you'll get served, at a getting pizza, how you get treated. Yeah. Well, this is again why another thing when I hear prominent people on the left who have big platforms start shitting on the trans community because it's a cheap shot. They're punching down, and I'm like,
punching workers.
And homeless people, right? Trans youth more likely to be homeless than just about any other group. When I hear that, I think, well, you don't understand. And I've talked about this before, and what keeps coming up, which really, really pisses me off. So the Democrats embrace identity politics. They wave their pride flags. They kneel in their kente cloths. They don't give a shit about black and brown people. They don't give a shit about the queer community. If they did give a shit about the queer community, they would have codified queer rights years ago. They wouldn't have sold the trans community out when they did their marriage equality bill, which was bipartisan. Great, they passed it. I'm glad they did. You fucking sold out the trans community. So what we don't need is somebody on the left going, well, what? James Baldwin, justice delayed is justice denied. Don't you dare tell me that I can't center the struggle of my trans siblings when I'm marching for Palestine. Because you know who's telling me I can't do that? Or am I queer? Just queer in general. You know who's telling me I can't do that? Stupid Democrats and Republicans who were like, well, you try to be queer in Gaza.
And don't get me started on this.
Do you not? I've been on TikTok. You don't think there's queer people in Gaza? Guess what? Queer people are everywhere.
Yes.
And if you're willing to sell out talking about white supremacy or talking about anti-queer bias, if you're willing to say, like, we're on the left, it's all about class, but we're not going to talk about that stuff, your movement is gone. It's not a movement. Movements consist of everything, and everybody. And that's one of the things, and I'm disappointed with the way Dr. West's campaign has gone because of all the ups and downs. He is very good at articulating that. And no matter what happens with his candidacy, his voice needs to be out there to articulate it. I know what I wish would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he'd run with Jill Stein. Because, listen, Jill Stein's very smart, very committed, but Dr. West is a far better speaker. I saw him at, I think it was New York City. He was out there somewhere, and this electrifying speech about Palestine.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Like, no matter what happens, we coalesce, man. We need that voice out there. That voice is serious, and it's better than mine. And you know what I mean? Like, so, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot of choices. Who knows what's going to happen? We can't predict it in this election, can we?
Yeah.
But going back, that excludes the recognition of the oppression of any group. That's not a successful movement.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when it comes to things like that on the left, I really think that there needs to be a coalescing of realizing that we cannot divide the working class. And by dividing the working class, it's just like when somebody's constantly doing something wrong, but then you're afraid if you let them know that they're doing something wrong, that they're going to up and leave. And it's like, it's not about telling them what they're doing wrong. It's about how you say it. For instance, I could tell you how bad of a job you're doing, but if I tell you in a horrible way, then yeah, of course you're going to leave. But at the same time, if I tell you in a more kind and loving way that, look, I appreciate you and wanting to work with us in this situation, but this is more the best way to do it, because if you keep going about it the way you're going about it, you're going to risk the job and the performance of what you're doing. Talking to white people about white supremacy and how they're being pawns, used within a system in order to keep us divided. And if you say it in a kind way, it is not going to be divisive. And if they don't want to listen, well, guess what? That's on them. And that'll be on their conscience because you presented it to them. But if you present it to them in a kind way, I honestly think that a lot of them really don't want to be labeled that. They don't want to be associated with that. But if you bring it to their attention, it's just like, for me, I have to constantly remind myself not to be misogynist. Yes, gay men, we can be misogynists. We have to check our privilege too. We do. Somebody that, hell, I had to check my internalized ableism a couple weeks ago. That's true. I have to do it. I have to check my I have internalized white supremacy because of living in this system. So if I have to check it, everybody else has to check it too.
And the thing is,
I think it's okay.
Not to accuse people and just to say, listen, and those that I'm referring to who are saying, let's not talk about white supremacy and all this stuff. I don't think cancel them. I hate canceling. I'm not a cancel culture person. Then let's have conversations about why we need to do this. And when talking to people of privilege, white privilege, I mean, I'm in that position where I get to talk to audiences, and I center discussions of privilege in whatever I'm talking about because I have that platform, right? And I use it because I think the only acceptable purpose of privilege is to dismantle privilege. That's our responsibility. Goes with it. So how do I do it? I use my platform. And I've had people say, like, well, why'd you have to bring up? I'm like, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I come from a place, I don't know everything. I speak confidently, but there's a lot I don't know.
Same here.
And I question myself constantly. But ultimately, we're on the right path. I think scholars being able to connect the struggle for Palestinian liberation with the struggle against white supremacy is very helpful. And then connect it to access to resources.
Yeah.
And so there you've got your whole, look at Palestine. Their access to earning a living is restricted. Their access to food, water, even before the siege, this big one, their access to food and water was restricted.
Yeah.
Those are class issues, but there are also supremacy issues there. And that always works, like you said, inextricably linked.
Yeah. So, that's something that I would like to see the left more coalesce around, just being kinder to people and recognizing the intricacies and the links between class and identity. But yeah, so as far as that goes, like, God, I knew this was going to be a great conversation between me and you, but I didn't realize it would be this good. It's kind of like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing.
Yeah, it's like it's like when you hear about a restaurant and the food is really good, and you're like, okay, I've seen people enjoy this restaurant, but then you actually go there and you actually eat the food, and you're like, dear God, I want to get this 5 stars on Yelp. That's what it's like having a conversation with you.
Oh, you're so. please keep complimenting. I like it. I like it, and it makes me happy. And I feel the same way about you. I like talking to you, and I think you balanced me out well, because I'm just like, and you're like, people need that balance of energy. We need all kinds in our movement, and and I also respect this, like you, and like Jay, and everybody on the network. You guys and Nick and Sab, you're putting out content regularly. Like, I got something to say too, but I've never undertaken what you're doing. That's hard work. Like, there are days, I'm sure, well, you also deal with your illness. There are days where you're just shot, and I'm sure that's true of anybody, and yet you do it. You guys are always there. Anytime I turn it on, it's on. I can always watch new RBN content almost every single day of the week. And I have to say, I applaud that commitment. People appreciate it. People appreciate that you're there, that you're consistent, and that you're a voice. And I can tell that because anytime I watch any show on RBN, I just look at the comments and everybody's engaged. So I do appreciate it. It's easy for me to come on for an hour or two and be like, and do my whole thing. You're doing this all the time. So having the platform, I respect it. I also want to say something, if it's okay.
Sure.
When it comes to cancel culture. So, like, I watch Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar. And I know a lot of people on the left are like, rah, 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 rah. I don't like them. And my thing is, I learned things from it. They're really good on labor issues, worker issues, have been really good on Ukraine, calling for a ceasefire since the beginning. I'm not trying to sell people on it. I'm saying I also saw the interview where Crystal and Kyle, he's not on Breaking Points, but like she is, where Crystal and Kyle interviewed Bree. And I didn't like the way that conversation went. And you know what I can do? I can watch that and say, didn't like it. And then watch this other thing and say, I learned something from this and I appreciate it. I think we need, I'm not telling people what to watch and what to think. But not everything I hear on yours, sometimes I hear you guys say things and I'm like, oh, I would say it differently, or I don't agree with that. I'm not, but I watch. Like, we can't, and I'll probably change my mind tomorrow. I do. But I think there's stuff to be learned. And when I hear somebody who's more establishment, like, I can't stand Joyanne Reed. She just gets under my, it goes back to, she was a guest host on on that progressive Sirius radio station for a while. And I was a caller and I got some good points, and she just hung up and like started saying horrible things about me after. So I'm like, whatever. And then she blocked me on Twitter. It was a few years ago, during 2016 with Hillary. So I've always not liked her. But then she said some really good things lately. So, like, I'm glad she's saying them. Let the people on CNN and MSNBC, who still have some audience, not a major audience, when they start coming around, I'm actually regretful. I just want to say this, because I've been ripping at the squad for a while, calling them the fraud squad. And then I had a tweet the other day because AIPAC is organizing against all the members of the squad. And I regret, I'll never take that tweet down because conversations exist under it. I don't want to silence it. But I was like, oh, now you're asking for our money after you didn't fight for Medicare for all? Like, screw that. And I am kind of regretful because, honestly, I'm glad they're saying what they're saying. Not all of them are as forceful as Rashida Tlaib, but I have to say, I'm grateful that she is being forceful. I'm not great about the Democratic Party, but I think we have to be like good on Rashida Tlaib. You don't have to be, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, she's been feckless before. Okay, but she ain't being feckless now. So welcome. And you should leave that damn party.
Yeah, I honestly think that the party itself, I think that somebody like Rashida Tlaib, if she were to leave the party, I think there will be a lot more freedom for her.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are kind of like caged birds, where it's like they can fly, but they can only fly within that cage, right? But once they leave that party, I think that some of them, not all of them, because I think some of them are really just in the party because they really want to be that in that party. But I think some of them feel like caged birds, but
What is the expert
but
saying?
I think it's the seed is really good. They get their water. Things are popping right
It's
within
a
that
nice cage. $175,000 a year cage.
Yeah, that $175,000 a year gold-plated cage with that great health care.
Nice.
And it's like, what is worth more to you? Is it being within that cage and having the safety in that cage, or actually being out here with the rest of us birds? And yeah, we may not get that regular bird seed all the time, but at the same time, at least we can fly whatever the hell we want, and at least we can actually do the best that we can for the people, rather than being confined within this capitalist party that continuously shifts and helps us move further and further towards fascism, right?
Yeah, we're there. Yeah. And you said it beautifully, and you made me think of why does the caged bird sing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think there was a good argument to make in the past.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody had said somebody like Rashida Tlaib should leave and go independent, and the good argument would have been, yeah, well, she'll get crushed, and the media will never pay attention to her. But that is not what the case is now. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I do not support as a candidate, but I support his right to be a candidate.
Of course.
What a missed opportunity, man. If he was anything like his father, he'd be out there talking about Gaza and Palestine. If he was anything like his father, and I know the gravity of the words, his father was assassinated, but RFK would be standing in protests right now. I'm not like glorifying the guy. He wasn't perfect by any means, but he'd have a surely different perspective than RFK Jr. has on Israel and Palestine. But yeah, if Rashida Tlaib left the party a few years ago, she would have been ignored. They would have vilified her. There would have been something they came out with, but that's not the case today.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in where she is, imagine if she did. She ran Indy right now, she'd win her district.